The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Thank you, Tally Olson. We are back, comfortably zoned in a vat o' pine tar, the podcast about the book. My co-host and co-author is George Grimm. He is here. Hello, George.
Hello, Ralph. Hello, Peter.
How do you do?
Yes, Peter is our guest, Peter Golenbock, who wrote the foreword to said book and has been incredibly helpful along the way, is here. Welcome to the show, Peter.
Well, thank you so much.
All right. First of all, you are covered in the book. You are featured in, 7 different chapters,
That's right.
George?
That's right, 7, and probably quoted in a few other ones too that we didn't credit as Golenbock University, but you probably sat in on a few others too.
Yeah. So
happy to help.
If you said it was a brilliant book, and we go by that.
Okay.
All right. I'm going to let George ask the questions that he's curious about.
Well, Ralph, tell the people listening the name of the title of the book, for crying out loud, will you?
We did in the title of the show, Comfortably Zoned in a Vat o' Pine Tar, with Ralph Tycho and George Grimm. And
how in the world would they know that that's the title of your book, for crying out loud? They probably figured it was the title of your podcast.
Well, that's why I said the podcast, not the book. And then I went into at the beginning, Peter.
Well, you confused me.
Well, I've confused many people, and you're not the first and won't be the last. But that is the title. It's available on Amazon. You read the PDF of the book, Peter. Anything that stands out in your mind that you'd like to refer to? Anything in our interviews that were transcribed into the book that you'd like to clarify or elaborate on? Anything that comes to mind?
Well, since I can't remember what I had for breakfast, this is not an easy thing to do. I must have read this book of yours 6 months ago. So
okay.
I can tell you, your interviews on your radio shows are always so very interesting, and much of what is in this book come from that. So I can just tell you, without giving any specifics, that it's well worth reading.
Okay. George, anything you'd like to ask Peter? I know you were curious about the senior league and the owner that disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Peter,
out of the 7 that we have of you, there's a couple that are that were really interesting to me. One was about the Senior Professional League, and the other one was about Billy Martin Jr. I didn't really care for Billy Martin when he was Yankee manager. But
well, what was the team? What was the team you rooted for when Billy was the manager?
Well, Yankees, but I just didn't like the guy. But
you're kidding. You didn't like Billy?
Yeah, no. But then I read his interview with you, Billy Martin Jr.'s interview with you, and it really changed my mind about the guy, because I saw where he came from and why he was like that, and I really thought that was an interesting piece, an interesting.
Well, Billy was such a tremendously interesting person.
Right.
I mean, he was a guy who got to the Yankees only because Casey Stengel was his manager in Oakland in 1948 or 49, something like that. That's the only reason he got to the Yankees. Because Casey started managing, he was the Oakland manager in 47 and 48, and ended up being hired by the New York Yankees by George Weiss to be the manager in 1949 at a time where everybody thought Casey was a clown. He had managed the Boston Braves. He had managed the Brooklyn Dodgers and not done terribly well. He didn't have very good players at either of these places. But George Weiss knew that Casey Stengel was a baseball genius. Knew that this guy knew talent, knew how to mold talent and make them into a winning team, which of course you realize is exactly what he did, winning 14 pennants in 16 years with the Yankees from 1949 to 1964. So he discovered Billy. He discovered Billy playing in Oakland. Billy was his third baseman. And Billy was the sort of guy that if somebody was giving the team trouble and Casey needed Billy to punch him in the mouth, Billy was the guy to do it. You know, Billy was absolutely the guy to do it. Also, if he needed somebody to bunt for a base hit, if he needed Billy to make a great defensive play, Billy, Casey knew, was a 250, 257, 258 hitter. But somehow, when he got that hit, he'd win you the ball game. And that was the kind of player that Casey Stengel wanted. So you know, who was the star of the 1952 and the 1953 World Series? It was Billy Martin. In 1952, he got the hit that won the World Series, the last World Series game for the Yankees. In 1953, Jackie hit a pop-up to the infield that nobody was supposed to catch. It was the sort of thing the first baseman didn't go for it, the pitcher didn't go for it, the third baseman didn't go for it, the shortstop was too far out of the play, and Billy comes racing in, somehow catches the ball knee level and saves the day. If the ball had fallen in, the Yankees would have lost the game. But he caught the ball, so they didn't. So this is a guy with, you know, a modicum of talent who knew how to win. And so George Steinbrenner knew Billy from his reputation and hired him to manage the Yankees. The problem was that Billy was such a popular guy among the fans that Steinbrenner couldn't stand the fact that these fans saw this team as Billy Martin's Yankees, not George Steinbrenner's Yankees.
Right.
And George's nuttiness and control and narcissism was largely the reason why he hired Billy 5 times to be the manager, firing him 4 times, 5 times. I guess he fired him 5 times. And from what I understand, at the time of Billy's death, Clete Boyer told me that George was inviting him back to manage a 6th time.
Wow.
So, you know, if you're a gentle kind of a guy, which I suspect you are, you don't like Billy's brashness. You don't like his toughness. You don't like the fact that he orders his pitchers to throw at the opposing batters. A lot of people didn't like that.
Yeah.
You
know, but as I
mentioned-
said, after hearing the interview with Ralph and Billy's son, you know, I really came to like the guy. I you know, really changed my
Well, Billy's son's lovely. Billy Martin Jr. is a lovely guy. He's really a really lovely guy. He is.
He gave us a terrific interview. He was open and frank, and what a wonderful experience that was, and not atypical of the interviews that you've conducted with me over the years. The one that stands out to me is the one with Bobby Brown and you, Dr. Brown, and you reminisced going back 30 years, how you had the hots for his daughter, and you put it in such a nice way that you didn't insult him. Wonder why you're a wordsmith, Peter.
His daughter looked like Grace Kelly, for crying out loud. When I was there interviewing him, this was back in 1973, and I was in his palatial home, and she walked in wearing this white dress, and she looked like Grace Kelly. I know.
And you sounded like you had that memory ingrained in your mind, and you couldn't wait to tell Bobby Brown
Absolutely.
about that.
And he was, I'm sure, thrilled to hear it because he felt the same
Of course,
way.
he took that as a compliment. Your words were music to his ears, as they are to any Yankee fan, any Dodger fan, any Boston Red Sox fan, any St. Louis fans, with your great works about the individual teams.
Well, let me tell you about that. I mean, I spent a lot of years interviewing a lot of players, and my favorite baseball book has always been The Glory of Their Times by Larry Ritter, who was a friend of mine, a lovely, lovely guy. He was an economics professor at NYU, and I got to know him when I was living in New York. And what I started doing is transcribing the interviews that I made. I started with Roger Maris, and I went to Jim Bouton, Ted Williams, Stan Musial, so many of them. The Red Sox pitcher, Gene Conley, who was going to Jerusalem.
With Pumpsy Green.
Yeah, with Pumpsy Green. So it's interviews with 17 of these fabulous ball players, all of whom are no longer with us. And I made it into a book which is called The Whispers of the Gods, which will be coming out in February. Rowman Littlefield is publishing this thing, and I'm very, very much looking forward to it because I think people will get a big kick out of reading what these fabulous Hall of Fame players have to say.
Yeah.
There are probably extended interviews of your interviews for Dynasty.
Yeah,
and
right.
I can't wait to read them.
Yeah, it should be fun. I'll tell you also, today's the 21st, on November 30th will be opening day for my latest, which is called Valentine's Way, which I did with Bobby Valentine, who I saw play baseball. I grew up in Stamford, Connecticut, and Bobby is from Stamford, Connecticut. And I went to see a Ripplewam High School baseball game, and Bobby Valentine was in the 9th grade, and he was the shortstop. I mean, you don't see that.
High school team.
It was on the high school team. You don't see juniors playing on the high school team. He was in the 9th grade, and he was the shortstop. And 2 years later, I went to see Stamford High School play Ripplewam High in a football game, and Bobby scored 5 touchdowns.
Oh.
And so, amazingly enough, this fella from Italy on Facebook sent me an instant message, and we went on Skype and we had a conversation. And I said to him, do you have any, favorite baseball players? And he said, well, I'm a very close friend with Bobby Valentine. I said, no kidding. Bobby's Italian too, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I said, would you kind of do me a favor and would you, put me in touch with Bobby? And so he called Bobby and he sent me via email Bobby's telephone number. And that's how we hooked up. That's how we hooked up to do this book. And I have to tell you, if you loved Ball 4, Bobby Valentine is as spectacular a storyteller as Jim Bouton was.
Wow.
We must have talked for 40 hours for this book. And it gives you, it puts you sitting next to him on the bench, in a bar, on a plane, in a fist fight. I mean, it's just an amazing journey from his, high school stardom to being a first-round draft choice with the was it the California Angels? Yeah, with the California Angels. All the way through this fabulous managing career where he
excuse me, I think he was originally with the Dodgers.
That's right. With the Dodgers. You're exactly right. And the funny thing is he hated the Dodgers. He was a Yankee fan. He was hoping that he would be signed by the Yankees, and he had gone to Yankee Stadium and he had met Mickey Mantle, and he had his picture taken with Mickey Mantle, and so he was incredibly disappointed to be signed by the Los Angeles Dodgers. And what's so interesting, you know, his coach in the minor leagues was Tommy Lasorda. He loved Tommy Lasorda. Tommy Lasorda loved him. So he started together in Ogden, Utah, with Tommy Lasorda, and the stories that he tells are so absolutely fascinating. He just loved Lasorda, and his interactions with Lasorda were so interesting. But one of the things that Lasorda did was he said to his boys, he says, "I want you to write a letter to the Los Angeles Dodger player who plays your position, and tell that player why you're coming to take his job." If you can imagine that.
Yeah.
And Tom Paciorek did it, and 2 or 3 other guys did it, and Bobby did it. Walter Alston, it turns out, and this is all in much greater detail than what I can tell you now. Walter Alston hated Lasorda, and he hated Lasorda's ways. So interestingly enough, none of those great players except Steve Garvey, who was on that team, Garvey refused to write that letter. Garvey was smart enough to know that that was a stupid thing to do. But these kids, 18, 19 years old, for crying out loud, your manager tells you to do something, you do it.
That's right.
Garvey didn't do it, and he ended up playing on the Dodgers.
Garvey was a bat boy for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and Gil Hodges was his hero. He wasn't going to write a letter to Gil Hodges under any circumstances.
Well, I mean, at the time, I'm trying to think who the first baseman for the Dodgers was. I can't. You know what? It would be good if I could think of his name. But the thing was that when one of those guys did write to him and tell him, "We're coming for your job," this was a guy who did not have a great deal of self-confidence. And according to Valentine, it's one of the reasons why he retired prematurely.
Wow.
I mean, there's some real wow stories in this book, the way Bobby tells it. It's just, we had so much fun doing this thing. It's just, if you got a chance.
You mentioned the California Angels.
Right.
That's the team that Bobby was playing for when he ran into that fence and
broke his leg in 3 places.
Impaled his leg. It was like
right. And there's a story behind that too, which I find so interesting. His manager was the former college manager. I don't know. For some reason, I can't think of the guy's name right now, but it doesn't really matter. But this was a guy who emphasized speed. He wanted speed. He wanted you to leave the dugout, run out into the field. When the inning was over, run back into the dugout. He wanted that. One of the center fielders for the California Angels at the time was Mickey Rivers, young kid. Mickey Rivers never ran to do anything. Mickey Rivers shuffled. He was slow. So on this particular day, the manager says to Bobby, "I know you're our regular shortstop, but I know you're gonna be the guy who's gonna be our shortstop. But for this game, would you go out and play the outfield for me?" And Bobby, being 20 or 21, said, "Well, manager, sure, I'd be happy to do it." And because of Mickey Rivers' inability to impress that manager, Bobby was playing out there when the ball went out and he went up against the wall and broke his leg.
Wow.
There was another kid named Barry who was on that Angel team and was a center fielder who was also hurt that day.
Yeah, right. Ken Berry. His name was Ken Berry, and that's the other reason. And that's the other reason Bobby was out there that day, because Ken Berry was hurt. That is correct, sir. Yes.
I got to meet Ken Berry in the minor leagues when he was a minor league manager, and Ken Berry was a rock and roll freak. Creedence Clearwater Revival was his favorite songs, and we sat in the dugout before a game for about 3 hours and talked music.
That's great. That is so great. Yeah.
So everything in baseball comes together. There's no story that doesn't bring back memories of some, and that's why we love this game.
Without a doubt. Without a doubt.
And I think George and I reflected that in our work, and again, you were such a big part of it. 7 different chapters, and contributing to a few more after that. So you helped set the tone for the book, and we're forever grateful. Thank you, Peter.
My pleasure. I'm honored you wanted me in the thing in the first place. So I'm very happy to have done it. Certainly.
Okay, let me ask you: what's his name? Ron Fraley, that first baseman on the Dodgers?
I don't want to say yes. I don't want to say yes or no because if I'm wrong, this is a fellow who was a very fine ball player, and as a result of that pressure of having somebody write him that letter and tell him we're coming to take your job, Bobby told me he was, it really upset him, and he retired. One of the reasons why he retired early. All I can say is, if you want to know exactly who that is, on November 30th, or order it from Amazon, and it'll show up on November 30th, and you can find out exactly.
Peter,
who it is.
I'll ask you a question. What's the most interesting thing you found out about Bobby Valentine? Bobby Valentine by writing the book or researching the book.
That he had the ability to tell a story and put you with him wherever he was the same way Jim Bouton could. I mean, what you loved about Ball 4 is when Jim went on the roof of some hotel in Washington with Mickey Mantle and 2 other guys with binoculars and looked into the hotel rooms of stewardesses. You were there with him, and you were there as he did it. And that was Jim's beautiful skill, his ability to tell a story and make you, feel as though that you were with him. And, I've done a lot of books with a lot of different people, and it's a rare quality. I mean, Sparky Lyle was able to do it because of the intensity of that 1978 New York Yankees team. Whatever happens to be happening.
Leonard Schechter gets a lot of credit for that, and you will get a lot of credit for the Bobby Valentine book.
Well, it wasn't Schechter. It wasn't Leonard Schechter.
It was Schechter.
Was it Schechter? Lenny Schechter? Okay, yes. Lenny Schechter should. Lenny Schechter certainly should get a lot of credit for that, by all means. He was smart enough. He was smart enough to see.
My point is, so will you for the same reasons, Peter.
Okay, that's fine.
Right. All right. Except that, I can't wait to read your book, and I can't wait to send you a hard copy edition of ours.
I can't wait to get it. And as soon as we get off the air, I will send you my address.
All right. And George, close it out, asking Peter anything you'd like to.
Yeah, probably only that, through your career as a writer, have you ever cared to write a book about something and was beaten to it by someone else? Did you ever want to write about a subject but somebody else beat you to it?
Absolutely. The greatest story has to do with my book, George, which was about George Steinbrenner. I had a contract to write that book somewhere in the early 1980s. And I spent, let's say I got the contract, let's say I got it in March. So I spent from March to November interviewing so many of the people George grew up with in Cleveland. I interviewed the people he was with at Williams. I interviewed the people at Lockbourne Air Force Base. I interviewed people who were with him when he owned this basketball team in the ABA. So I did a tremendous amount of interviewing. And come November, the publisher says to me, there are 2 other books about George Steinbrenner coming out in the spring. If you can't get us the complete manuscript of your book by February 1st, we're canceling the book.
Wow.
Okay?
Wow.
And they did. They canceled the book. And how many years later? 25 years later, I decided, this book is now, ready to be completed. And I spent, another year, sold it to another publisher, and it came out. And from what I understand, they're about to make a TV series out of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I know.
Oh. Well, I hope you get more credit than you got for 42 by Jackie Robinson.
Hey, look, you're not in this business for the credit. You're in the business for the people who you meet and for the work that you do.
I know. We got to tell ourselves that occasionally, and the sad part is we believe it sometimes. And you're absolutely right. And the people we meet and the laughs like this. How about that? Thank you, Peter. Great show.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome, Ralph. Great to meet you, George.
Peter.
All right. Take care, guys.
All
right.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Hey, we're going to sign off. George Graham, I'm Ralph Tycho, Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. Vat O Pine Tar, comfortably zoned in a Vat O Pine Tar, the podcast, not the book, but we talk about the book an awful lot. Proud to do it with you, George.
Me too, Ralph. Good to
All right. Be well. Talk soon. Thanks for listening, everybody. Adios and happy trails.
The proceeding has been a Comfortably Zoned network production. You are advised to keep your dreams wet, your humor dry, your children and grandchildren out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics who wear dresses. Thank you for listening, everyone. Happy trails.